Looks like we are live. Uh, Looks like we're live. So let me just do one more troubleshoot.
Yep, I
Got
got
everything
us.
on deck. One more troubleshoot. We're looking good. We're live. Um, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. By popular demand, I guess. Uh, we're gonna resume our True Detective season 2 series of just live session breakdowns. We're kind of hoping that people watch the replays, which ended up happening 5 months after we recorded the initial lives, but but better late than never. I guess that's kind of how things
Better late
go.
than
We are the Winter Hill Warriors. I'm Chenny. This is Damon. And yeah, Damon,
Yep.
any thoughts before we get into this breakdown? We're going to do episode 5, so I'll do a quick recap when we start. But what did you think?
It's good to be back. In a way, this is a massive, so maybe it wasn't just us being lazy. Maybe this is intentional, where you can watch this as a two-part recap from our behalf. But a lot of things come just doing a show that we can just chop it up
Right.
about,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think we had talked about it last time where we had said that this season, and hold on, I'm just checking our audio on the live as well. But this season it's underrated, but it's so much to digest when you first get into it, and it's a season that gets better on the rewatch, right? Would that be
Yes.
fair to say?
100%. The first time I watched this season, it was my buddies in college had like a ton of inside jokes that we would go over about, like, with Chisani, signatures everywhere, like all that type of season 4, where it's just like, did you mean to write that? Like, is that really how you wanted this to come across? But when you take a look at it again, things start to make more sense.
So, all right, let's let's start. Let me see. Let me just turn off the echo location. All right, let's get going. Um, so to recap, we ended episode 4 with that huge shootout in Vinci, and basically, so this is what happened. It's all a trail that leads to these like Mexican gangsters named Lido Amaria, and then what ends up happening is there's this huge shootout at this meth cookhouse, and let me see if I can. Okay, yeah. There's this huge shootout at this meth cookhouse. A bunch of people get killed. A bunch of innocent bystanders die. All of the Mexican gangsters are wiped out. And then one of the cops, Teague Dixon, is also wiped out. So he was one of the guys that was tasked with investigating the death of Ben Casper, the city manager. So that's what happened. And our 3 main protagonists, Bezzerides, what's it called? Paul Woodrugh, and Ray Velcoro, they all survived. So we start season, we start episode 5, and I think it's like, 66 days after the fucking, the shootout, right? Like, that sounds about right. So, yeah, it's 66 days after the shootout,
Yeah.
and give me a second. Yeah, 66 days after the shootout, and we see Frank Semyon. He has now moved into a much more modest home in Glendale, California. It's still not a bad house, but he's been having money problems because Casper stole $5 million of his dollars, so he has now downsized. And we get some info from the news. The news is covering the shootout, and we hear that the Attorney General Geldof, who also, I just gotta say, man, they gotta have like, I hate to say this, but they gotta have some more stereotypical last names for these characters, because like Geldof is this Asian dude who I'm pretty sure, Damon, was in Warrior, played like one of the Chinese guys in Warrior, and I kept forgetting that he was like who they were talking about because his last name is fucking Geldof. With all the names and characters that they introduced this season, and with all of these characters where like you might see them for 2 seconds and then they become very important to the plot, just make the last names a little bit more realistic. Because I was like, who the fuck is Geldof again? Oh, it's the Asian guy who was the assistant or the AG. But apparently Geldof is now running for governor. So he's using this Casper case to run for governor, and he's blaming the Mexican gangsters for the death of Ben Casper. I think the dude Lito Amaria's girlfriend or something had stolen like one of Casper's watches or tried to pawn it off, so they're just making that connection. It's kind of flimsy, but that's what they're using as the connection. And then Geldof is like, all right, now I'm gonna run for governor, and the whole thing feels kind of fucking fishy. And Frank is just kind of watching, and he's also hearing about the railway deal that's or railway construction that's starting now, and Frank has no land, and he got screwed out of the deal. So very bad times for Frank right now. He goes in to see his wife Jordan. They are not on the best terms because they're having money problems. They're trying to start a family, and yeah, Frank heads out with who is this guy? Is it Nails or something? His right hand man now.
Yeah, and every time this guy pops into the scene, I'm not sure what to make of him. Like, his style is just like staring straight ahead, dead into space at all times.
Yeah, they gotta just do a better job of fucking introducing these guys, in my opinion. That's like one of the downsides of this season. But all right, that's kind of it for the intro. So we get the intro from Frank's perspective. Things are not good. What were your thoughts on that?
So this directly contradicts all that ambition Frank's been boiling up since the season began. Life in a bungalow, not so bad. I mean, probably me and many of my friends right now would be totally cool living in a nice California bungalow right now. But for Frank, that's just not going to cut it. Not a huge surprise at what went down. It kind of reminds me of what we're doing with The Wire, how a lot of the higher ups are so fixated on just tying the case onto one little crack to make sure it just shows a good face. Like, we're going to tie this to the Mexican gangsters. Case closed. Nothing else shady to see here, people. But we later realized that is not the case whatsoever.
Yes. Then we cut over to Velcoro. So we actually see Ray. It first intros him with a ID as security at the Vinci Gardens Casino. So he's now working for Frank, and he is no longer a member of Vinci PD as detective. Now, he wasn't pushed out. He just felt like the whole thing was weird, and it seems like he left on his own accord after the whole Vinci shootout. So we see that Burris, who he's like lieutenant, right? So Lieutenant Burris has paid a visit to Ray's house and is asking him questions about Teague Dixon. Burris says, yeah, we investigated a little bit more about Teague Dixon. Did he tell you anything while you guys were working together? Just, we found out some information about Dixon. He had some photographs, stuff like that, and might have been connected with some bad people. Burris won't really reveal much more than that, and Velcoro is onto him and is just like, did you come here to ask about Dixon? And another thing Burris actually, mentions is like, hey, why don't you just come back to Vinci PD? Why are you working as security for Frank Semyon? But Velcoro has his reasons. And Burris mentions, hey, look, it looks like you bought another Charger. So it looks like security work is paying off, not a ton, but he's definitely got more money in his pocket as compared to his previous detective days. And then Burris drops the hammer and says, look, since you're no longer working for Vinci PD, you're no longer working for the city, we have to evict you from this row house because these row houses are reserved for municipal employees. So Velcoro's got 60 days to leave this house. So kind of like a strong arming type of visit where
Yep.
Burris is like, hey man, like if you want to come back to Vinci PD where quote unquote we can kind of keep a better eye on you, then you know you can kind of keep the house. And then we see Velcoro go off and do some of his regular duties, and he visits this apartment complex that Frank Semyon has basically bought back into, right? Or bought is a strong word. He didn't buy shit. He just kind of said, look, you're cutting me in on the rents again because I need money. But this is an apartment complex that Frank had previously owned. Because he needs money, he went back to the dude that he sold it to and said, you need to cut me in on, I forget what percentage of rents, but it was pretty high, Damon. It was like almost like 40%, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, it was an absurd amount that you could never actually run a profit off of if you're the guy paying that up.
Yes. So this apartment complex is basically, you know, all, you know, close to immigrant housing essentially, and you know it's not super rundown, but it definitely is a very poor apartment complex. So Velcoro goes to try to collect rent from this one tenant. This woman barely speaks English. She's $200 short. Velcoro looks inside, sees that there's a shit ton of people living in there, and Velcoro doesn't have the heart to actually be like, look, you got to get the fuck out. But he just says, look, you gotta make this money up, and if you don't, then you know, then I'm gonna put you on an ICE bus if you don't. But even when he says that threat, you can kind of tell that he doesn't really mean it. And as he looks around the apartment complex and sees kind of just how everyone is living, he's like, Jesus fucking Christ. So what did you think about that?
This scene actually gave me like a deeper color for what's going on around Vinci, because you have these waves of people in control, right? Not that dissimilar from what's going on in California, I mean, in the modern day with all the ICE stuff. So it's as if like they're using the Mexicans in the organized crime structure in a way that benefits like the bigwigs at the time, like the Chisanis and what have you. And then when they don't play ball, like you always have that threat you could hold over their head, which seems pretty scummy. But I get why Velcoro's going there, because he's a fixer now. He doesn't really have time to be the nice guy anymore. You mentioned the crazy intros. Insane that the scene just starts with Burris walking down Velcoro's hallways. We don't even get a knock on his door or anything. It just kind of comes up like that, where it's just like, oh, hey, Burris, in the middle of my home, just chilling. Then they have that weird standoff that you mentioned. But this just gives you an idea of like what Velcoro's into now. He's got Frank. Frank has his back. Frank's going to give him a higher ceiling than he could have made with Vinci, but he's going to be doing even greasier stuff than he was with Vinci PD, which is saying quite a bit.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that, how Burris is just at his crib, because it's technically not his crib, and he kind of just shows that with that behavior, so it's pretty funny. Then we catch up with our with Annie Bezzerides, who just a little rehash because it's been almost a year since we've done these, but Velcoro originally worked for Vinci PD as a detective. He no longer does. Annie Bezzerides worked for Ventura County, right? So she's working for the county, and then Paul Woodrugh was working for a highway patrol. And the reason why all three of them were lumped into the Casper murder is because Casper was Vinci's city manager, so that's why Velcoro would be involved. His body was discovered on the side of the highway by Woodrugh, so that's California Highway Patrol jurisdiction, and then it was in Ventura County, so that's how Bezzerides was involved. So anyways, we see Bezzerides, she's in a sexual harassment seminar. So I guess what happened was the younger cop that she had a little bit of a fling with, Steve, was a pissy fuck because Bezzerides didn't want their relationship to continue, so he filed like a sexual harassment report because I guess Bezzerides was technically his superior, and this has now landed her in sexual harassment classes, and the rest of the class are just a bunch of these like guys. I'm sorry, they picked the worst actors ever for these schmoes. They're like delivering the most robotic lines. They're like, hey, you know, if I look good, if I was handsome, then it wouldn't be sexual harassment.
I feel like we're watching a Shane Gillis skit minus Shane Gillis to tie it all together.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We got this dude who's kind of running this running this class, and I think in the notes, I was looking at the notes. What did you say about him? I think you said this guy is such a chump running the seminar.
It's just the way they dressed him. Like he's just like, come on, man.
Yeah, and he's got his legs crossed. Anyways,
Looks like a former youth minister, perhaps. I don't know.
yeah. Bezzerides knows that she shouldn't actually be here. She's just been getting fucked over. But when it's her time to talk, she just she sees how like fucking clownishly. I don't even know how to fucking whatever. Everyone there is a perverted clown. So she sees them and she's like, you know what? I'm gonna fuck around with these guys. And she just starts saying like, I really like big dicks. And these guys are like getting turned on. It's fucking crazy. And they're like, no. Like, keep going. So that's what she's doing, and she's clearly not happy. Then we cut to Woodrugh, and he actually has, out of the three, he's actually had like the best 66 days, I would say, which is a bit of a stretch, but he got promoted to be a detective in insurance fraud. So safer job, comes with a pay bump, I presume. The problem is we know that Woodrugh wants to be on highway patrol because he struggles with his sexuality. He's actually gay, and he wants to be on the highway because, like, basically every single night he thinks about just killing himself and going like 100 miles an hour on his motorcycle. So he wants to remain in highway patrol. But we see that he's in this mediation meeting with the actress. I think her name's like Miss Lindell or something. So, look, if you guys remember from the beginning, he stopped her at a trap. He stopped her on the highway because she was driving recklessly, and then she accused him of soliciting like a blowjob from her in order for her to not get hit with any charges. We don't ever actually see what really happened, but since we know that Woodrugh is gay, he most likely didn't do that. She's probably fucking lying, and you can kind of see all of this come out through this meeting. So basically, Damon, I'm trying to understand this. Her lawyers are just like, we'll drop the charges, just you can't then say that you were innocent, just don't say anything. That's what it seems like, right? They're basically like, we're going to drop the charges against you, even though you probably didn't do anything, but just don't say anything. And when Woodrough's like, well, I didn't do anything, I'm innocent, I'm not admitting to any guilt, they're just like, all right, well, what about your history with that private security firm? What was it, Black Mountain? Like, you probably killed a lot of fucking people. What about the Vinci shootout? Like, did you kill any innocent people? Stuff like that. Like, we can really fuck with you. So they're just trying to strong arm him into basically not acknowledging his guilt, but not denying his guilt as well, right? That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, they want to put him in this middle area where he's not in trouble. He just has to keep his mouth shut. And I mean, you know anything about Woodrugh, he's pretty much the guy who follows orders to a T. Even back with Black Mountain, it was like, yeah, that's just what they told me to do. Like, that's just what I did. He's the least freelance out of all of our main characters. And like you said, like the fact that the other lawyers were just like, yeah, what about that stuff? What about this stuff? What about like, I've never seen anything like this in my life with both other parties present, like across the table with each other. So everyone's just dirty in Vinci, I guess. That's just the way it goes in LA and Ventura County. He just gets raked over the coals here, and he's just got to take it. That's how it's got to be.
Yep. And we actually see, if you watch The Wire, we see D'Angelo's mom, but in this series, she plays, she's the assistant attorney general, right? Or assistant state prosecutor or something. Davis.
Yes.
So she's there, and she's trying to have Woodrough's back, and she's like, look, the tabloids fucking smeared him, and now you just want to drop the allegation, and he can't really say that he's innocent, and you were lying. And she's like, yeah, basically, yeah. So we don't know how this ends. It most likely ends with Woodrugh just being like, he can't really do anything about it, because the lawyers then threaten to still pursue a civil case. So he's in a bad spot. He doesn't really have a lot of power. All right, next scene. We then see Frank. He has gotten back ownership of Club Lux. What is it, Infinitum or something?
Yes.
It's kind of hinted that, I don't know if he killed Santos or just ran him off. We know that he fucking beat up Santos in the previous episodes and like pulled out all of his teeth. So maybe Santos ran off, but Frank has taken control again. And as he's, at the daytime shift at the club, some very, very scary Mexicans pull up. And we find out that they work for the cartel. So the head guy is this guy named Gonzalez, and then he's got this very sinister, shorter Mexican man behind him with a cowboy hat and shades on. And they pull up and they say, "Hey, look, we used to have an arrangement with Santos, the previous owner. We were able to move drugs through this club." Frank goes, "Well, nobody's seen him." And the cartel doesn't care about Santos. They're like, "Whatever, we heard about that, but we need to ratify our arrangement and basically have an arrangement with you." And Frank goes, "We never had one, and I don't need any partners." So he sends them off. And as they leave, we see the shorter Mexican just stare at Frank coldly. And props to Frank, man. He's got major balls going against the cartel like this. You know, it's not surprising that he ended up where he ended up, like in terms of the power and all that, because he just stares the guy right back and is just like, "Get the fuck out of here." And then after this, Frank goes and pays a visit to the Vinci mayor's office, Austin Chisani. Chisani is fucking passed out, not doing anything. And Frank is there to ask about this waste management company named Archeron. So from what I understand, Frank and Chisani and some other parties went in on this waste management company called Archeron, and what they did was dump a bunch of fucking chemicals all along the land, the farmland that where the rail would be built. So basically they would poison the farmland. It wasn't worth anything. So then the farmers would have to move off. They would have to sell it for cheap. And then another company, Catalyst, would come in, basically buy the land for cheap. And then when the railway project was announced, everyone who owned land off the railway would get rich as fuck. So, you know, they mentioned it here. Look, we sprinkled the quarter valley with heavy metals. But something happened, which is there was a guy. Let me see if I can pull up the name. There was a guy who was running the waste management company, right? Like, this guy might have been a criminal. I don't remember his name, but he like basically was the front man for the waste management company, right? And that guy all of a sudden is dead now, right, Damon? Like,
Yep.
and when Frank looked it up, apparently the guy, you know, his car just ran off the highway, ran off the side of a mountain or something. So the death is sketchy. Frank knows that someone that they're involved in was behind this quote unquote accidental death to basically, you know, tie up loose ends. So Frank's like, "What happened to this fucking guy? He's all of a sudden just dead." And you know, Chisani counters by saying, "Look, I know you're running prostitutes through the poker room that you're managing, and you didn't tell me about this. So now you need to give me $5,000 extra a month as a fee for for running girls, and get the fuck out of my office." So Frank heads out, and that's that. What did you think about just those scenes?
So you mentioned how Frank handled himself when the representatives from the Mexicans came through. He even throws in like a Cisco Kid jab at the little guy with the sunglasses on, which is definitely possibly possibly racist joke in there. So he's just like out for blood at this point. When he comes in to rattle Trasani's cage a little bit, right? Ship seems a little loose today. That one made me chuckle a little bit. I just can't really get a good pulse on who Chisani is supposed to be as a character. Where like season one, we had the Tuttles, we had a lot of intimidating characters who were part of the conspiracy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where like Chisani to me is like a boozed out scumbag who all of a sudden whips into shape and like has comebacks ready. Like not as believable, I guess, as some of the other bad guys have been. Not that Frank's not a bad guy himself, because he definitely is, right? But he's facing a lot of pressure right now, and he's kind of just got to make his standing whole again, right? So he's still at the beck and call of Chisani, reading into it. Maybe some of the stuff he's doing, like he lashes out, he says some messed up stuff to Chisani's door guy at the door. Maybe he's just like wholly insecure in the moment, and like that's how Chisani flips the tables. But I just feel like a guy like Frank is almost like too, I don't know, he's too cool to get like talked down to by Chisani, regardless of standing. I don't know how else to explain it.
No, it's I totally agree. And yeah, Frank, the Cisco Kid some nice racism towards Mexicans, and then he tells the Chisani's like Asian aide, Chinese. He tells him to stand in front of a tank.
Yeah, man, he makes like a Vietnam joke, and the guy's like, "I'm Chinese." Like, dude, that was crazy.
Oh man. All right. Let me see. What's next? Oh, okay, yeah. Then we jump to Velcoro in custody court, and basically, Velcoro's been he's been clean. He's been clean. He's still fighting for custody, and the judge that's mediating is like he's still leaning towards siding with Velcoro's ex-wife Gina. And look, Gina wants to push for a paternity test, which terrifies Velcoro because he doesn't want to potentially find out that Chad was the son of Gina's rapist. So Gina wants to order a paternity test, and the judge sides with Gina, says, in the meantime, Velcoro can get supervised visitation. So someone's always got to be present when he sees Chad, which is going to make it very awkward until both the paternity test and the toxicology test come back. And basically, like, even though Velcoro was quote unquote a hero in the Vinci shootout, none of this is really mattering. Gina has the fast track, and so Gina and her husband leave, and Velcoro's lawyer is like, hey, are you actually going to test clean? And Velcoro's like, yeah, I've been clean for 60 days. I want to fight this however I can. And the lawyer says it's going to get messy, so you better get more money. And then we cut to the poker room, and Velcoro is asking Frank for more work because he needs more money. He's like, hey, maybe I could do double shifts. And Frank goes, look, money's tight for you, money's tight for me, but I may have a job for you. The guy who bought the waste company we used in the corridor died. Place has been cleaned out. Oh, I found his name. His name was like Ali Kumninyaka or something like that. Like, dude, holy shit, these names are absurd. So Frank's like, I got a feeling that something is fucking up. I want you to tail one of the guys who works for me, Blake. I want to know what his life is outside of me. So we know that Frank is now suspecting Blake as some sort of mole in his operation. And Velcoro's like, yeah, I could do that. I could tail Blake, no problem. And then there's this moment where Velcoro tries to just have a normal, like, strategy conversation with Frank. He's like, what's your feeling? And immediately Frank just fucking gets cold and is like, what am I, in fucking confession? So anytime anyone tries to get close to Frank just immediately cuts them off. And but then Frank will be like, oh, let me ask you something, and then ask him a genuine question. Like, Frank is such an odd guy. But he goes, do you really think those Mexes did Casper? And Velcoro's like, I don't know. Like, it seems kind of bullshit. It was just a meth factory. Like, I don't know how Casper is really involved. And Frank's not really buying it. Frank says, look, Casper dies. I'm squeezed out of the rail corridor. Stymies my retribution. It's like blue balls in your heart. This, once again, man, I want to hear what you think about this, because this is kind of the epitome of this season, right? Like, they probably needed another 6 months to just, like, really get this corny type of shit out of the script and just tighten it a lot more. But yeah, what'd you think about all of that?
To me, it's the opposite of the problem season 4 had, where season 4, and totally different writers, which is even more interesting. Season 4 sometimes was too paint by numbers. This was like Pizzolatto found the coloring book, shredded it, and decided to create all of his own drawings from scratch instead, which can produce some pretty beautiful art if you kind of have some guidelines for yourself. But to me, it felt like, I think, was this the season where Cary Fukunaga was kind of pushed out of?
Yeah, they kind of had a falling out.
This explains a lot if you look at the whole body of work here, because there's some brilliant moments and scenes, but overall there's just some stuff that makes you shake your head, and it's unfortunate. Still fun to watch, but just lines like that, man. And he's trying to show, right? Frank's trying to show that he is in a similar spot to Velcoro, but he's still better than Velcoro. Where Velcoro is a guy who's probably been comfortable being down in the dumps a few times in his life. Frank is this guy who once thought himself almost untouchable. and now he has to grovel for what he thought he already had. So that's one thing you're trying to show with that dialogue, but you could do much better than that. And you could do much better like back and forth between those two actually trying to figure something out.
Yeah, totally agree. All right. Next up, we see Woodrugh. He's paying a visit to hang with his mom and to let her know that he is planning to marry his girlfriend Emily, and she is now 4 months pregnant. This really triggers his mom. His mom fucking just gets really mean about him, or mean towards him.
Kind of weird.
Kind of weird. It's kind of weird, right? Because we've been hinted at throughout this season that like his mom might be attracted to him a little bit. But she says some ruthless things. She basically is just like, look, you're a good-looking white man. You could have had the world, and instead you're a dumb fucking bastard. Seems like his mom almost wishes that she was a man, not because she's not attracted to men, but because she wishes she had like the freedom and power of movement.
Yes.
And so she says some mean shit, and then Woodrugh goes and looks for $20,000 of just straight cash that he hid at his mom's place. And this was pretty naive of him. Like, he hid it in her trailer thinking that she wasn't going to find it. And he discovers that it's gone. And she obviously took it. And he's like, why the fuck did you take all that money? And Woodrough's mom, Cynthia, is like, I've been out of work. You've had that money for the last 4 years hanging there. I needed a little bit of help, so I used it. And Woodrough's like, look, I'm making a family. I bled for that money. That's the money I made in Afghanistan. And I need it for the kid. And then his mom tells Woodrugh, like, this is where the resentment comes in, where she goes, I used to be a dancer, and when I had you, I carried you. I could have fucking aborted you, but I carried you. I brought you up alone. And then Woodrugh says some brutal things to her, which is like, you wouldn't even know, like, who you fucked that would have been the father. But either way, Cynthia counters by saying, it doesn't matter. I gave up my career for you. I carried you for 9 months, and I've been carrying you ever since. And then says, basically, I know you're fucking gay. Like, that's basically what she says. And this sends Woodrugh into a frenzy, and he calls her a poisoned coos and storms off while she's like starts crying. Very intense scene. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was intense as hell, man. It, to me, was in the same family of when Marty and Rust go to case the working girls in season 1 out at the trailer farm. Like, sad, tragic figures in a lot of senses. The idea that like the men are in control of this kind of world, like taking advantage of the women, which is for sure true. Funniest line of the whole thing to me came out of nowhere. I bled for that money. What'd you do with it? Slots? Says like that. She probably did. Yeah. His mom's one of the most over the top characters in the season. Full stop. Definitely some underlying strangeness here from an Oedipal Freudian perspective. We'll dig more into that later. To me, it also shows how much of a loner that Paul is, because you would know from meeting this lady for 5 minutes at a cocktail lounge that she is one of the last people you would stash $20K near. So the fact that he didn't have anybody else to hide that money with, he had nobody else in his sphere of influence, is kind of a red flag in that respect. But we know he is a loner. That's just kind of what he's about, mostly because he tries to keep people at a distance, not unlike Frank, but just for very different reasons, right?
Yep.
Abortion. The abortion thing gets mentioned a lot in this episode, with Chad, Ray's possibly illegitimate son. The idea of Jordan having multiple abortions at some point will come up. I think, already kind of came up here in the conversation after the Mexicans left. And then the idea that like Paul could have been aborted as well. So some pretty hefty themes here. I just think that they don't always come together.
Yes. We then cut to Bezzerides. She's, I think at this point now, she has been demoted to just work in evidence. So they're just basically like putting her in the basement. the missing girl's name is Vera, right? That's what it. That's
Yes.
that's what it is. So
Mm-hmm.
Bezzerides has still been quietly investigating Vera's disappearance. So she meets with Vera's sister, the one who originally was like, "Hey, my sister, I haven't heard from my sister in a while." And Raina, I think this woman's name is Raina, and
Yep.
she says there was a like a PO box or something that belonged to me. Like this part's a little bit confusing, but either way, she found some things in the PO box that that might be important, and it's hinted that maybe Vera put these photos and stuff in the PO box, but it's a bunch of pictures and then it looks to be like a pamphlet or something, like a ticket, September 9th, admit 1, and then there's like, I think we're gonna see more about these photographs after, but Bezzerides asked, "Hey, did you show these to the sheriff's office and follow up with them?" And Raina's like, "Look, when I talked to the sheriff's office originally about my sister's disappearance, they didn't do anything, so I didn't want to hand over this evidence over. I thought I could trust you, so here it is." And then we see that one of the photos is are the blue diamonds that was missing from Casper's safety deposit box. And as Bezzerides is taking a closer look at the photograph, she sees some a very notable politician in California, Fred Jenkins. He's a senator. So all of this is kind of sketchy because he's around very young women who most likely are escorts. She's doing all this investigative work in evidence, and her partner. Do you remember what her partner's name is? I totally fucking forget.
Dude. No.
Not super important, honestly. Like, really just not super important. But, her fucking partner. And so her partner, like, comes down to just kind of, like, check on her. He still cares about her. He's still kind of got his back. He tells her, like, "Look, it wasn't me who threw you under the bus for sexual harassment. I had your back. I even told them about our relationship," or the sheriff already knew about our previous little fling, and I took full responsibility. So he means well. Bezzerides is like, okay, whatever, like, doesn't really help her that much, but you can tell she's a little bit appreciative about it. And then he gives her some advice. He's like, "Look, you'll be out of here in a few months, but clearly somebody in the department is trying to screw you over. And if you had more friends, it might have been harder for this to get done." And as he's about to leave, she's like, "Look, I could use your help. There was, the missing girl thing, Vera, a few months back when we were working together." And he goes, "Yeah." And she goes, "You said you had looked into her old roommate's phone records and found an address where Vera last called from. What's up with that address?" He goes, "Yeah, it was up north. Like, I have it. What's the deal?" And she asked for the address. He goes, "Are you sure? You're supposed to be in evidence control. You probably shouldn't get involved with this." And she's like, "Look, I just really need it. I'll do you a solid later." And he's like, "Okay, fine, I got you." So he does get Bezzerides the address from where Vera had made a call. So what did you think about all that?
Elvis Alinka is the partner's name. I remembered Elvis, but I couldn't piece that last name together. I'm sad that this season didn't take off because I think Rachel McAdams has some definite chops with this type of material. Annie might be the most put together character that we see in the middle of the plot here. The parallel with the idea that she wants to protect her own sister and Vera, Vera's sister wants to protect Vera, both involved in similar dealings in a way. You see that connection there. Anybody who's watched any police department shows, any crime shows, knows that the evidence room lockup is where they send the losers or you've pissed somebody off. So Annie is the most Rust-like in terms of how she approaches a case because she's got this attention to detail, but she's going to solve it her way. She doesn't follow orders that well. And she delivers some pretty nice dialogue too.
Yep, absolutely. This season had a lot of the ingredients, man.
Did.
All right, now we jump to Velcoro tailing Blake. And while he's tailing Blake, he's recording these voice messages for Chad, and they're all very depressing. He just tells Chad that, like, pain is, like, endless.
Pain is inexhaustible. It's only people that get exhausted.
Yeah, just like diabolical fucking quote. But he tells Blake, and and follows Blake to Dr. Pitlor's practice. And so he's hiding out. He sees none other than, I think, Blake, Dr. Pitlor, and Tony Chisani, who is Austin Chisani's son, the mayor's son, who he had said he worked in hosting special events. And we're starting to get a good idea of what these special events are. These very attractive young women come out, and we see Blake, come to greet them. And then Tony Chisani goes and just starts like inspecting their breasts and shit like that while Pitlor watches. Then when Tony gives the okay, all of the women get in this white Cadillac Escalade SUV, and Velcoro then tails the Cadillac and tails it all the way to this like warehouse / like, yeah, it's basically a warehouse where these women are being dropped off to the Russian mob. We see none other than Osip greeting Tony Chisani, and Osip inspects the girls and then gives the okay, and then these girls go inside and stay here. So what did you think about that before we jump to the next scene?
You can connect the dots here a little bit and figure out that this is the makings of a plan to squeeze out Frank when all is said and done, because he's being circumnavigated. Remember, he mentions that he hasn't really seen any sign of Tony, aka Young Chisani, aka total bad guy, moving to Oakland like Austin Chisani, his father, said he was going to. So he's clearly around running girls on a bigger scale than Frank is. You see Blake behind Frank's back. You see Pitlor, Rick Springfield's just totally unsettling dude who we see more of later. Osip in cahoots, who's supposed to be Frank's buddy. Frank is in big trouble because these are a lot of power players on the chessboard conspiring against him. But the fact that Ray is recording all these messages for his son as he's doing this kind of like horrific recon is kind of funny. Like, just imagine like the inspiration he's getting for his son right now.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of Frank, we cut to the night shift at Lux, and it's bustling. Look, the club is doing well. It's going to take a while before he recoups his $5 million. So Frank is just looking over, and Jordan isn't happy because she doesn't want to be back in this business. And Jordan looks over the books, so she's got some accounting chops, and she has been looking over the books from Santos's reign of the club, and Jordan says these books are complete shit. I have no idea what this club is making. Anyways, then she talks to Frank, and she's like, look, I know what's going on in the poker room. I know you're running girls through there. We're getting more into the scumbag, dirtbag lifestyle that you said you were done with. This isn't what I want. I thought we're going to go clean. And Frank's like, I tried to go clean, but someone stole all of our money, so now I got to go make it back. And Jordan's like, look, I don't want to be some gangster's fucking wife. And that gangster word really bothers Frank. So they get into a bit of an argument. The tensions between them are very high. And Frank, they've been trying to have a kid this entire time, and they haven't been able to conceive, and that's pissing Frank off. And then Jordan comes clean. And this is something you had mentioned earlier, Damon. Jordan says, look, in my 20s, I had what is it? Like, I had 3 abortions, and somewhere along the lines, like, I think I got, my body got fucked up, and I don't think I can have children, essentially. So it's not you, Frank, it's me. And she's like, well, now I'm clean. I'm me. You're you. Like, we can both, like, so who loves who? Because Jordan still loves Frank very much, but now this is going to be very difficult for Frank because having children has been a big part of what he's wanted. We then juxtapose that with Woodrugh, who is having dinner at Emily's spot with her mom, and her mom seems like a very cool, soon-to-be grandmother who is like, look, I'll help out a ton. I can't wait to raise the kids. And you see Woodrugh, he's kind of feeling some love, more love from his mother-in-law than his actual mother. Then we cut back to Frank and Jordan's whole argument, and she's basically just like, look, you're becoming a fucking monster. Like, we're not doing well. We got to figure this thing out. We're getting hammered every single night. We're not tied together. We're not the couple that we used to be. I'm going to go home, and you should make some time to join me. and she leaves Frank. So what did you think about all that?
I like the Frank and Jordan chemistry because it was not there in the beginning of the season, but it grew on me. And yeah, she makes a good point. It isn't like Frank has her living in abject poverty here. She's living in a decent little bungalow ranch, and Frank's just getting carried away with what he's trying to do. But when you're with a gangster or with an aspiring, white collar transition from gangster, you got to understand that's coming with the territory here. The adoption angle is cool, full circle, because Frank was also adopted. So it was like, or Frank also was, he had that rough childhood. So I think that was a cool little addition there to the way to kind of put it through. This is a classic gangster's office setup. We've been watching The Wire, and this looks just like where Stringer's operating out of in the back of the strip club. So he definitely has a nice little setup going on here. Um, when they're in the transition from the scene where Velcoro is doing all the stakeout with Frank, you can almost see this look in Frank's eyes, like he's a cornered animal, like he's on watch duty now, trying to defend for himself. He's intense, pensive all at once. Super dangerous spot for him, right?
Yeah.
You could see why Jordan's apprehensive, but no kids is definitely going to be tough on Frank because his legacy is now in question more than daily LeBron and Jordan debates from Stephen A. Smith here. So
Yep.
he always wanted to continue on that dynasty. And how do you really do that? So Frank, more questions than answers, which you can see just kind of piling up on him throughout the episode.
Yeah. Good stuff. We then cut to Felicia's bar, which is, I think Frank had like bankrolled or whatever. This is where Velcoro typically meets with Frank to discuss business. And we see that this time it's Bezzerides and Velcoro. And this is the first time they've talked since the whole Vinci shootout. And neither of them are doing well. They're fucking both drinking a lot. And Bezzerides is there to basically bring up the fact that Vera had photos of the blue diamonds that Casper had gotten stolen from him. And she also shows the photo of the state senator. So she's telling Velcoro, look, this is big. This involves like all the government workers, so like high level politicians, a bunch of people in Vinci get fucking shot. Like there's definitely blackmail and corruption involved. Velcoro doesn't seem interested. He's pretty defeated. He's just caught up in trying to get custody of Chad. So he's just like, look, I'm not interested in coming back to this. Like basically just this world sucks ass and I'm just not trying to get my hopes up or try to help anyone with anything. So Bezzerides leaves, but before she leaves, Velcoro is up front and says, look, it was good seeing you. I didn't realize how much you were on my mind. So rare moment of just vulnerability. Then we see Frank does go home and just have a light drink with his wife, and they do watch a movie. So it seems like Frank is coming around a little bit. Thoughts on that?
Hey, some guys are meant for the suburbs and some guys aren't. We'll find out which Frank is on the next episode. The Annie and Ray conversation was cool. I like watching them interact because I think that they're both darker souls, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Everybody's on this downward arc, but they've stabilized a little bit. That's the core theme of the episode across all of our central characters, right? Ray trying to claim he was a consultant instead of being Frank's fixer. Consultants have arguably caused more death and destruction in America than any mobster's fixers, so that might not be the best description for him either. When he drops like the sublunar world, those guys we grew up with who just had like super high vocabularies and were smart kids, but they just drank and did too many drugs, so they kind of like scrambled their brains.
Yes.
That's Ray. Like he definitely, you assume he's an idiot most of the time, but then he just pops off like a nihilistic philosopher at these moments. If you look between like the rough way he speaks, and then he'll just like take a shot of whiskey and like talk about like robots' dicks being vapes and shit like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to find a balance in between.
Yeah. I wonder if Pizzolatto had this, was like sort of like this growing up.
It's like a shout out to one of his buddies that never made it.
Yeah. All right. Next scene. This is like so ridiculous.
Yeah.
They meet at the site of the Vinci shootout. It's just like so fucking ridiculous. Like, there's no reason to do that, especially. So what is it? Assistant State's Attorney Davis calls over Woodrugh, Velcoro, and Bezzerides because she has something to tell them, and they decide to do the meet out at the site of the Vinci shootout. Once again, you kind of get it, right, in terms of a theme and all that stuff, but if you're trying to make this show like somewhat realistic, they would never fucking do that. That site would be way too hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like that would be the first spot you think of. Like, yeah, let's go meet at the place where we almost lost our careers.
Yeah, like it's fucking insane. But see, like this wouldn't have made it through the proofread segment, but it's one of those where like you could see, you know, if Pizzolatto just being like, no, we're fucking doing it.
Has to be there.
Yeah, so Davis is like, look, I'm trying to create a separate task force, a private task force, and she is skeptical of Geldof. She says, all of a sudden he's done investigating Vinci corruption, and then out of nowhere he's got this massive war chest of money to go run for the governor. Like, this is all very, 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 very fucked up, very obviously corrupt. Davis wants to go after it. Now, we don't know if Davis is going after this because she really cares about justice, or it's going to be a huge feather in her cap if she is able to nail down, the attorney general who's running for governor. If she's able to nail down a corruption case like that, then it would change her fucking career. Either way, she has called over Woodrugh and Bezzerides, and Woodrugh is more than happy to be a part of this team because he wants to be back in the field, and he's not happy with how things played out in Vinci. And Bezzerides is more than happy to be back because she's investigating the disappearance of Vera. So Davis says, look, I'm putting together a confidential special investigation unit. Our goal on the surface is to track down Irina Rufo, which is the girlfriend of the now deceased gangster Lito Amaria. She was the one who apparently pawned off Casper's watch. So that's like the surface story for why they have this unit. But the real purpose is to find out who killed Casper and see what's going on with Vinci PD, the state, AG, all the corruption. Just basically just investigate all that shit. Once again, Velcoro's like, look, I'm not a cop anymore. I'm out. But apparently Velcoro has his private PI license, so he could technically be made as a detail to the state attorney. And Velcoro keeps trying to deny it and says, look, I got a job. And this is where Davis has done her research. She knows that Velcoro needs money and says, I know you're in a custody case. I know you need extra money. I could help you make sure that you keep your boy because I could pull some strings with the judge. Maybe you get paid some extra for those details, stuff like that. So, look, this piques Velcoro's interest. That's all he cares about. So he's like, all right, fuck it. Reluctantly, I am in. And but before Davis leaves, she drops one more bomb. Because Davis originally, when this whole season started, she had tasked Bezzerides with investigating Velcoro. She didn't like Velcoro. She thought that Velcoro was corrupt. And the rumor was at that time that Velcoro killed the man who had raped his wife, Gina. And Velcoro thought that he killed the guy who raped his wife. But Davis is like, yeah, so actually a few weeks ago, they caught the guy that raped your wife. I thought you knew. I assumed maybe your ex-wife told you, but this guy got pulled in for sexual assault in Venice. His DNA matched with 6 unsolved rapes, including your ex-wife's kit. So this is very emotional for Velcoro. But because of this, Davis, for some reason, thinks that Velcoro, like, oh yeah, well, he didn't actually kill the guy that raped his wife because, that guy was still on the streets, not realizing that Velcoro maybe killed an innocent guy.
Yeah.
And this bothers Velcoro because he's like, he got the information from Frank. So now he's like, wait, Gina didn't tell me this. And this whole time I thought I had killed someone that had done this. Now it looks like I just killed some random fucking guy. So now Velcoro is about to spiral. What did you think about all of that?
Great term there with he's about to spiral, because he is on a path of cleaning up after last episode went down and we saw what went on so far this time through. He's not doing drugs anymore. He's sticking to Modelo's. plenty of guys just stick to Modelo's, right?
Yeah.
But this is, you can tell by the look in his eyes, he has that sort of frenzied dog look in his eyes as soon as he processes all of what just went down. Like, am I just a pawn? Like, did Frank screw me over? Um, yeah, this is not to spoil anything, but this is one of the things that really holds Ray back from any kind of peace that he was
Yes.
maybe possibly approaching.
Yeah. So now it's going to be rampage mode soon. But we see Frank. Frank has paid a visit to that holding company Catalyst that has bought up all the land, and they're responsible for distributing the land. This is where Frank was supposed to get his land from in a deal with Casper. And the head of Catalyst is Jacob McCandless, and Frank's like, look, I need the land. And McCandless is like, I can't get you the land. However, there is something that could potentially get you some land. McCandless seems a little bit concerned, but he asked Frank, look, have you ever heard of Casper possessing some films, some home movies, maybe some photographs? And Frank doesn't. But McCandless is like, look, if you could get your hands on these photographs, because from what I understand, the police never found it in either of his houses, maybe we could get you some land. And it's all on a hard drive. So Frank's like, okay, I do this. I get 5 parcels. And McCandless is like, okay, yeah, fine. I'll get you the 5 parcels if you could do this. Then we jump over to Velcoro now. Now he's just, a raging fucking animal. Pulls up to Pittler's place and just basically is like, hey, what the fuck is going on with you and Chisani and Osip and all of that? And Blake and Pittler's like, look, I got nothing, nothing's happening. But Velcoro just, I think, breaks his fingers and just starts beating the fucking shit out of him. And Pittler comes clean. He says, look, all I'm here to do is make 8s into 10s. So, because Pittler, despite, he's known for psychiatry, but he secretly has a secondary degree in plastic surgery, right? Or it's like facial reconstruction or something like that. So Pittler's like, look, my whole thing is I make these girls like perfect, and there's these like hooker parties that fucking Tony Chisani and Casper came up with. And he actually says, I think Austin Chisani, the mayor, doesn't know about this. Like, he's actually not involved with this. This is something that his son and Ben Casper started doing on their own. But it looks like Tony, his son, has political ambition. So Tony and Ben Casper came up with this little scheme where they get these escorts and they host these parties, these sex parties for these politicians, and they just blackmail these politicians. Casper records them secretly, and then using this blackmail, they'll get in on business deals, get money, get power, stuff like that. So Pittler's also like, look, the rumor is there's, Casper had some footage, and the last thing I think Velcoro asked about is Mayor Chisani's late ex-wife, Helene, who committed suicide, but she was a patient of Pittler's, and Pittler says, look, I actually tried to treat her to the best of my abilities, but all the Chisani men are such monsters that she was already beyond like repair. So it's not like Pittler killed her or anything like that. He literally could not save her. What did you think about those scenes?
Pittler is just such a uniquely strange, kind of awful guy here. He's not as bad as a Chisani, but he's right up there. This is the perfect target for some of this Marty/Rust level violence that Ray inflicts here, right?
Yeah.
when Ray's just like approaching the desk, and then Pittler in like his weird verbose pontification is like, the fact that you seem so scary is the reason that you're not going to do anything. Like, that's not the guy to try this on. You see, haven't you heard about what he did to Aspen's dad? Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
He just got informed that he killed a guy who wasn't the one who raped the mother of his child. So this is not the guy to trifle with here. But this was a nice little scene of like, some unchecked violence. It's kind of fun sometimes in these shows. I'm not going to lie to you. This was a nice moment for that. So I just got like the picture painted to me is almost as if it's like an onshore Epstein party. Is that what you're kind of thinking in terms of
Yes.
like what they're like the trafficking and such? The Chisanis are huge weirdos. Not a huge stretch that Austin would not know, but that Tony would be one of the key players in this because he gave some really odd vibes when we saw him earlier in the season, and he had one of those European escorts, I believe, at his house when they first investigated him.
Yes.
So good job of connecting the dots here. I think this is one of the stronger parts of the web of lies that they uncover.
Yes. All right. Let's jump ahead to the next scene. This one I'll be quick with. It's just Annie talking to her sister Athena, right? I think it's Athena.
Yes.
And Athena had like flirted a little bit with the sex party world. I don't think she says she never like ended up doing anything, but she did, make some money, flirt with some of the guys, stuff like that. And she had done the webcam stuff in episode 1. But Annie is asking Athena for help in getting into the party. Annie's gonna go as Athena and infiltrate the party, and Athena's like, I don't really talk to the girls. I'm not really in that world anymore. I can try. And she does agree to help. She also mentions that she is gonna go to school. She got into Cal Arts, so she's gonna go back to school. So it's a nice moment of reconciliation for the sisters, and Athena is basically gonna scheme to try to get Annie in the party. Meanwhile, while this is going on, Woodrugh has been going around all the pawn shops and jewelry stores to ask about these blue diamonds. He finally finds one jeweler who gives him some good intel about the diamonds and says, look, actually a policeman came, a few months back with pictures of identical diamonds. He wanted to know if anybody had come around to try to sell them. And Woodrough's like, who was it? And the jeweler still has kept the policeman's card, and it was actually Teague Dixon. Now, the thing is, Teague Dixon was doing this before the whole Casper thing even happened. So Teague Dixon knew about these blue diamonds before they investigated Casper's safety deposit box. And then I think so that's kind of very, very alarming for Teague Dixon. And then I think Bezzerides and Woodrugh then pay a visit to the location where they had gotten or they're driving to the location where Vera had like called her roommate. So I'm going to pause there. What did you think?
Little bit of a contrast here in terms of, what we're doing from scene to scene, but Annie and Paul end up uniting after this. The fact that Annie's sister got into Cal Arts and she's like, oh yeah, cool. Like, can I just get the invite to this party, please? Like to put you kind of back into this sphere of people you just got out of. Sometimes she's appearing like, she's kind of got to use her connections a little bit here, even if it's not in her sister's best interest.
Yes.
Remember, her own family has some weirdness to it, in the same vein as the Chisanis. Like Pitler mentioned that Chisani's first wife was inconsolable and that Chisani was kind of a beastly dude and messed her up in that way. Annie's own mother had the mental health issues and had like walked into the river, quote unquote, when she passed away. And remember, Annie's dad and Chisani's, the older Chisani, used to be boys back in the day with Pitler. And the fact that Annie's father also wasn't really phased when he heard that Athena was doing cam shows, like either he's very accepting or is possibly desensitized, maybe both. Mm-hmm. There's some strangeness going on that side too. The next scene, the line that got me was when the shopkeeper was describing the anonymous cop who turned out to be Dixon. Portly man, smelled like bourbon, like a lot of flatulence. Like that's a tough way to be described after one meeting. R.I.P. Dixon here. But yeah, the blue diamonds, man. We mentioned it before we started chatting. It's one of those things that maybe could have been brought up a little earlier, or maybe like, I don't know. It felt like they kind of waited a while to really let the dominoes fall here.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Just a lot of moving parts that are just impossible to juggle. But when you kind of put it together, you're like, okay, I can kind of see how this all goes.
Yeah.
So Velcoro meets with Gina. He's like, dude, what the fuck? You didn't tell me that they actually captured your rapist. And Gina's like, I just, I didn't know what to really say to you. Now, this part is interesting because it almost seems like everyone just assumes like, oh, Velcoro didn't actually kill just a guy. Right? Like Davis is like, oh yeah, you didn't kill that guy because the actual rapist was still out there. And Gina's like, why'd you lie to me and tell me that you killed my rapist? Did you think you were trying to protect me or something? So she's like mad, but she also, you can kind of tell she kind of like thinks better of him because she's like, oh, you know, my ex-husband isn't actually a murderer, right? Like, and Velcoro the entire time
He's just a liar.
Yeah, he's just a liar. And Velcoro the entire time is trying to say that he actually did kill someone, but he like can't get the words out of his mouth. So it's one of those things where he looks better now, even though he did just kind of kill a random guy. And Gina's like, look, I have to get this paternity test because I need to know if Chad is your son or the son of the man who basically like destroyed my life. And totally fair point. Like, you know, and Velcoro's like, he doesn't want to know because he's really scared of what it could be. But as Gina's leaving, Velcoro goes, he set me up, and he's clearly talking about Frank. And Gina's like, I don't even know what the fuck that means. Yeah, I'm gonna pause there before we get. I think, yeah. I'm gonna keep going real quick. Gotcha. Then speaking of Frank, we cut to Frank. Him and Jordan seem to be on some better terms, and Frank seems like he's starting to come around to the idea of maybe adoption, and then so I'm gonna pause here actually. So what'd you think about just the Gina and Velcoro stuff?
The point where Ray kills the suspected rapist, we've already framed that as the moment where he loses his way, where he first goes off the rails. Like, he used to be a decent man. Like, you can feel his pain when he realizes this and when he talks through it, because in his mind, he's not only reflecting on being deceived by Frank, he's also trying to cope with the fact that that was it for him. Like, he let that consume him and turn him into who he is now. He's always had a hard time not letting his dark side take the wheel. But, you know, when times get rough and shit goes down, sometimes handing the wheel to the dark side is just what people do. And I feel like that's really where he's heading now. You can see it in every action that he takes, everything he does. He's painted himself into a corner, and it almost looks weirder from her perspective now, what he did. Like, he had a hard time talking through it. He was like stumbling over his words and like wasn't even sure what he thought of it. So, I mean, you know, that's just who he is.
Yes. All right. Then we jump over to Bezzerides and Woodrugh. They have arrived at the coordinates where Vera had last made a phone call to her roommate, and they see this little like mountain little lodge, and nobody seems to be home, but there are scavenger birds, carrion birds, circling up top, and this tips off Bezzerides because she's like, something's dead nearby. So they keep walking, and they find this little shed where it smells terrible. There's no corpse, but there's a lot of blood and a lot of signs of torture. So we don't know who has been tortured in here yet, but very, very sketchy fucking little shed that they discovered. Could be where Casper got tortured. Could be where Vera got tortured. We don't know what's up with her yet. And then we jump back to the final scene of the episode where Frank and Jordan are kind of accepting of their new life. Jordan's like, I don't need all that money, leave the business. Frank is struggling a little bit with it, but he's starting to come around, and Jordan even wants to talk a little business with Frank. So that's how you know that she's starting to accept him again. As all this happens, we then hear pounding on the door, and Frank comes out and he peeps the door, and he sees that it's Velcoro, so he's got his gun in his hand, and we know why Velcoro is here. So Velcoro's like, hey, you alone? And Frank lies and says, yes, I am. Why? And Velcoro goes, you and me need to talk, and that ends the episode. So what do you think about all that?
Love the cliffhanger beat that we got here right at the end, because yes, they do. Yes, they do. The season finds its footing. You could say too late if you're going to give up on it, but we're not. So it's hitting at just the right time here. The tension to close out the episode is great. Frank is on this home sweet home arc, right? He could conceivably walk away from the table, fold his cards, and have a decent life. But then he drops that little line where it's like, I trust self-interest. Like, yeah, the moment's kind of gone now. He was never going to settle down. That just isn't who he is. Him and Ray are in the similar boat to where it's like, these are two men that have spent their whole life living it to this point as who they are, and they're not about to change because they just don't want to. Like, they just don't. They want to be the bad guy. Where in season 1, it was more like Rust and Marty juggling, what does it mean to be good? What does it mean to be bad? Like, does the world need bad men to keep away the even worse ones from the door? That whole spiel. This is a season full of like people who are more just like, yeah, there's no coming back. Like, you can just tell from the way they're operating. I wouldn't put Annie in that bucket. She's a little different. I wouldn't put Paul in that bucket, but these two for sure. One thing I just noticed from this season so far is I just wish that Vinci was a little scarier. Like, I know that some of our settings, like season 1, season 3, you have that kind of creepy countryside, like the countryness, like the Ozarks, the Louisiana Bayou country. It's a little funky out there. You don't really know what you're going to get. There's a lot of secrecy. A lot of stuff is shrouded here. Vinci's arguably more dangerous, but I'm just not really feeling like, when the music plays, the intense music, and it's daytime in Vinci, it just seems more like a depressing place than it does like a dreadful plane of existence like we saw in season 1, season 2, or season 1, season 3, and even season 4 a little bit.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like, it feels like an inland California city. It doesn't it don't have the eeriness, but all right, that does it for the episode. Yeah, I mean, we'll continue next week with episode 6. We got a few more. The story's starting to kick up. I think this is when the story starts getting exciting. If you can just like piece it all together enough to get here. So yeah, appreciate everyone watching. We'll catch everyone later.
Yeah, take it easy.
All right, I think I fixed it.
Yep, I kept clicking it and listening to it, and it was definitely the echo